So joining me on this, my brilliant panel, political YouTuber and commentator, Mahyar Tousi, and the historian broadcaster, Tessa Dunlop. Mahyar, the cancellation of Nigel is where all this started, but it does seem deep-rooted that there is a wokeness and a lack of business-like approach in institutions that are there to make profit.
Well, absolutely. And I think this is, firstly, a tiny bit of a victory, small battle, celebrate, but it comes with a but, big but, actually, and this big but has three parts. Firstly, when it comes to this issue, because you're right, it's an institutional issue, it becomes basically a political, cultural problem. Number one, this whole apology, if they truly cared about Nigel Farage, and in the letter that we saw, it was very nice words, then they would have given him his account back. But they didn't. They said they were going to offer him an alternative arrangement with NatWest. Secondly, this letter that clearly was probably taken half a day or hours to write with the help of expensive lawyers and PR officers and probably ChatGPT. This was about the backlash, especially from the House of Commons, when a number of MPs decided to call for her to resign, said Dame Alison Rose. And this was clearly about damage control. And thirdly, they were going around creating all these scenarios that, well, this doesn't actually represent our views in terms of the bank. But we've just exposed the managing director of Coutts & Co., who has been exposed as an anti-Brexit, pro-EU rejoin, sort of very wokey, spend more time creating diversity programmes, and this is the problem.
And the issue for Dame Alison is that she sat next to the journalist from the BBC who broke the story, and that points the finger of suspicion at her. She's got to answer this question, was she the source? Because if she is, she cannot stay as the lead banker at the NatWest, can she?
No, that's the thing. When the story broke about that dinner, the response from both the BBC and Coutts & Co. was declining to comment, not denying it, declining, and that makes it even worse.
Whore & Co., here we come.
But it goes beyond what you mentioned about, obviously, the reputational committees and all these groups that used to be reactive. So whatever we call them, the wokey people who infiltrated the system over the last few decades.
That's what you call them.
Yeah, well, no, I call them control freaks, and the authoritarians, control freaks who infiltrate the cultural institutions. But whatever they were in the past until now, they were more reactionary. So they were more worried about, OK, is Nigel Farage part of us, so maybe we should do something. Now, because they haven't been challenged, they are now being proactive. They are now starting wars or battles for no reason. They are the ones who are cancelling people. It's the same thing with the education system and everything else, teachers getting cancelled left, right and centre. Then they haven't been challenged, and now we've opened a can of worms, and now we have to close it.
Right. Anyway, let's get back into the mists of time, your memories of childhood, climbing trees, running around with your friends. Now, you're not allowed to do that anymore, because if you want to do it with your children and your grandchildren, you will find that a local busybody from the council comes round and finds children, adults, and everybody else in between for petty activities which they say have a detrimental effect on the quality of local life. So picking up stones, climbing trees, playing ball games, shouting, why would you want to shout, feeding the birds, tuppence a bag, just to name a few. A report to the Public Spaces Protections Orders has found that councils have been dishing out fines as fast as rum cake is eaten at a conference meeting. These orders are surely there to crack down on antisocial behaviour, not grandmothers taking their grandchildren to feed the ducks. Mahyar.
Yeah, it's a good point, but actually it goes beyond that. My theory is centralisation has gone even further than before in this country, because it's not just about party politics, but also the media and everything else, conversations. Because of that, it's not just a vacuum. Just like what I said earlier, the local councils and local politics are going unchallenged. And these days, before you had the taxman, the central government coming after you, restrictions and cash cow schemes are being done on a more local level, and no one's...
It's all about raising cash, isn't it? That's why they go after the motorists. But feeding the ducks, for heaven's sake,
not just that,
why should anyone...
Kite flying or swearing in a park. Are we just...
I'm not so keen on swearing.
But 2 seconds. But you see, this is clickbait for GB News, because, of course...
That's why you're here.
Well, indeed, and you're doing very well. But
thank you.
Kite flying, we all think that's a travesty. I want to feed ducks and fly kites. But if you drill into some of the issues, swearing, shouting, I think dog barking is one of the real biggies, isn't it, having an antisocial dog? And actually... things like that, if you live with it day in, day out, if you have someone who's shouting on your street day in, day out, It is disruptive.
Of course.
And if you no longer
Yes, but
have
not in a
that
park.
fabric,
If somebody's in a park exhaling and filling their lungs...
that's very different.
Well,
And
This is what this is about. These are public spaces.
And that's the problem.
This isn't private spaces.
Yes, exactly. And it's a slippery slope thing, because there are always a lot of people, especially on a local level, because you've got a loud minority basically deciding, like NIMBYism and everything else. There are a lot of people who would go with personal prejudice, like their neighbour has a problem, like I'm just because of that. I want basically a blanket policy on everyone in the country. And you allow one thing to go, yes, even as a libertarian, I still believe in basic orders.
All right. Well, we now need to move on, because we've got surprising news for you. No, we've got to move on. Ofcom has told us that TikTok is the most used source of news for teenagers in the United Kingdom. So, Peter Marion Thomas, is this where you get your news from? I thought you were watching me, but never mind. Yes, the same Chinese-owned app that was banned on all government devices after security concerns were raised is the platform your children, and possibly even mine, are getting their news from. Supposedly, more news organisations refocus their strategy on social media to help alleviate the risk of young people being misinformed. As Keisha once said, TikTok on the clock, but the party don't stop, which I probably need translated. Tessa, you've got a TikTok page.
I do, and it was from shouting at a right-of-centre, well-known male presenter. I trended on TikTok. At the time, I didn't have an account. It got 6 million clicks. And so I had to pay my teenage daughter, she was like my enabler, to catch some of the sort of backwash. And I now have followers who are sort of more than half my age, and I know not what to say to them.
Well, obviously, as a political YouTuber, I have a problem with this TikTok thing becoming a main source, not just because of misinformation. The problem is people already, especially young people, their attention spans are like short and smaller, so they don't get the full story. It's like clicking on just seeing the headlines or just click on it. TikTok is the same thing, few seconds. So I try my best, not just to challenge the mainstream media like the BBC and others, but also try to tackle this issue with TikTok news, for example, because people need, yes, short and snappy news.
But OK, let's go back, because I so often want to do the 17th century, when pamphlets started being issued. And when they were first issued, they were amazingly inaccurate, and they tried to put exciting things on so that people would buy these broadsheets. As time went on, you develop really good and capable journalism, because the things that are accurate get a better reputation and do better in the marketplace. Isn't this what's going to happen?
Well, it's really interesting you should say that, because, you're right about the penny papers, and then you got, from that, the rise of, for instance, the Daily Mail, approximately 120 years ago. However, it takes a while to filter through. And how discerning are children? I did a bit of a poll. I've looked into some of the most successful newscasters on TikTok. 8.9 million viewers. He's called News Daddy. He looks about 20. And he's a beauty. I mean, he's there in his sort of finery, and he speaks at 100 miles an hour. But what's interesting is his most popular videos, I found them to be effective and accurate. He was very effective on...
That's the point, that people will look for things that are true.
Well, and so pretty and true. I mean, he looks like a sort of... If we put you back in time, maybe 20 years ago, and you spoke very fast and had perhaps bigger cheeks and a wider smile, and in fact, no, nothing like that.
So if I had a facelift, yes, OK.
No, but you made a good point. Just like 100 years ago, this is about the new media. It's about new media, and again, includes YouTube channels and everything else. It is a new age, and it will evolve, but there will be a lot of issues in between.
So can we trust the people to be discerning, and we can actually trust children? I have great confidence in my own children not to be gulled by left-wing propaganda, and I'm sure other people's children are just as wise.
Indeed, it's always really worried me, left-wing propaganda. But I'm much more concerned about who owns this information.
Yep.
Because ByteDance is a Chinese company, and they're obliged, if Beijing decide that company has to support the Communist Party, they can give up our information.
That is a really important point, a great point to end on. Thank you to my panel. I hope to see you again next week.